I remember how rich I am when the weather drops below 40. We drink and make love to make up for the heat that poverty doesn't afford us. Cheap liquor seeps from our pores as we slap skins to rhythms that interrupt the shake of our shivers. A sound collage of hums, vows, and wishes wrestling with our sheets as we try to keep the blanket wrapped around our trembling bodies, all too aware of every gust of wind that somehow finds its way through the crevices of us.
Black Out Loud Media Group. Welcome back to another episode of the Brown Sugar Cafe podcast, the place where poetry meets conversation. I'm your host, Terrence P. Elmore, and before we get into today's topic, make sure you hit that plus sign so you don't miss an episode. Also, please subscribe to my blog, thebrownssugarcafe.blog, and if you find any value in this episode or any other episodes, make sure you leave a heartfelt review. So with that being said, let's get to it.
I am iahMae. I am probably most known as Charleston's current sitting poet laureate. But I am a writer, a filmmaker, a community organizer, and an all-around creative.
Yes, that is very true. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you
Thank you for having
sharing
me.
your poem and being a guest.
Yeah.
So it's National Poetry Month. I see
Mhm.
that you've kicked it off with reading a poem a day. That was something that an idea that my wife gave me to do. Well, she said don't try it daily, but you're doing it daily. So I commend you for starting that off. How does it feel so far?
Um, it's a little wild for me. I'm not a very social media person, even though people think I am.
Mhm.
Uh, I tend to be in my stories, looking at stuff or responding and talking to people, but I'm not a huge poster. So it's been an interesting practice in being okay with being seen. But I think it's challenging to record and post daily.
Yeah.
But it's also very rewarding because I'm getting to interact with poets and poems that I love. And I'm just getting to share the things that bring me joy. And the thing that brings me the most joy is sharing words. So it feels good.
Right. Yeah. I'm enjoying it so far. I
I
said I'm
also
gonna
think
do
you
that.
should do it.
Yeah. You think I should?
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
everybody should read or recite a poem a day. It's like medicine.
That's true. That's true. It's very freeing. Even if you're reading your own stuff or
Right.
like you said, your favorites, you've inspired me. I think I
Mm.
might. I don't know about putting it on social media, but
I mean, it could just be for you. And I think it's good medicine to practice and participate in fellowship with poems.
right, right. So congratulations,
Thank
again.
you.
How does it feel to be the current poet laureate of Charleston?
Hmm. It has been a roller coaster of emotions. If you you were one of my friends around the time when I even thought about applying, I was very anti-establishment with it. I was
Uh,
just like, y'all know I don't deal with governments
yeah,
and I have a smart mouth, so I don't know how I'm gonna deal with these people. I don't know how to deal with folks in general on this public scale, but I have a really good support system, and they were like, this is kind of the next step of what you've been preparing for. So I need you to sit in that and figure out why it is that you even thought about doing this. And
mm,
I think that that's been holding me this whole time. I felt really small in some moments, but I felt really powerful in others. Um, and I'm constantly reminding myself that this is a position of service. I am a public servant, and to stay grounded in that feels good because it feels natural to me.
right. Wow. Yeah. When you were talking about the governmentness of it, I seem to forget that. Yeah, there is that
Yeah,
government part of being a poet laureate, and it's more than just the arts. And it's. I'm glad that position is there
right.
because poetry is something that it. I don't know. It just depends. So
Mm,
sometimes it feels like it's everywhere, and then other times it feels like it's not. So how do you find that balance in trying to I guess, expose people to poetry?
I think it's because the way I came to poetry wasn't through like the written word.
Oh,
I grew up with a very like low key artistic family. Like they'll never tell you that they are, the thing. But like my grandfather is an amazing poet. Like he used to write my grandmother beautiful poems from Vietnam.
oh wow,
And my
yeah,
grandmother is a crafter. Like that woman can make anything. And my mother is kind of the same way. Like she sews, she creates wreaths and all these other things. So we were always surrounded by creativity and poetry. I was doing poetry before I realized I was doing poetry. Just the way that I would say things, or I would like hear a line somewhere and be like, "Ooh, like that's beautiful," and like recognizing that as poetry. So, I think that gives me an advantage in a lot of ways,
yes,
in bringing poetry to people because I'm able to see that, like, oh, like you don't like this kind of poetry, but maybe you like movies. You don't like this kind of poetry, but maybe you like rap. Like there are so many different ways to come to poetry, and yeah, I think that me understanding that helps me bring that to other people.
that's good. That's good. Something about your social media, and I know you say not really into social media, but I love whenever you do your slides, like
Ah,
your set of pictures. I love whenever you do those. It's so refreshing. How did you come up with that? And is it always some inspiration, or is it just off the cuff?
so I want to say it was last year because again, I have so many issues with being seen and like perceived that I was like, okay, like enjoy sharing photos. I've always been like I was really into MySpace. I was really into
Oh
Tumblr.
yeah,
Um, so I like the idea of sharing photos and videos as art, but I was also like, I want to protect my family and my
right.
friends from being seen and perceived so much. So I'll do it monthly. I'll just do like a photo dump. And it was a thing that was already kind of happening on social media with a lot of like, again, I follow a lot of artists. So people were already doing that. And I was like, oh, okay, like this takes the pressure off of me of having to post all the time, but it also allows me the like freedom to play around a bit and
Yeah,
be a little mysterious. Uh and then I got into making like my calendar for the month because my partner is a graphic designer, and I was like, I think I want to post about these things, and he was like, make yourself a calendar. Like you're smart, you know how to do the things. He like walked me through Photoshop and like a little bit of Canva and was just like, you know what you want it to look like, go for it. So it's been like I don't know, like a challenging creative expression too.
yeah,
But it's just all been fun. I've really just been looking at it very unseriously.
yeah. I love them. I love whenever you put them up. I'm like, oh, oh, here we
Thank
go.
you.
Here we go. And it's like each slide, it has its own personality, but everything goes together.
Yeah, it's just really like a collection of things that I've captured over the month. And I'm like, okay, like let this be a reflection of what that month was for me. But
Got it.
again, in a very unserious way.
Yeah. One of the questions I wanted to ask you about is it's more serious.
Hmm.
The Calhoun statue.
Hmm.
And when that was removed,
Hmm.
you were a co-writer on a poem.
Hmm.
It was called "What's It Like to Walk Under the Shadows."
Hmm.
What was that experience like, writing that and
Hmm.
presenting it in front of people?
Well, that's actually a really interesting story. Um, so the previous poet laureate Marcus Amaker invited me to be a part of this poem for this moment. I had been very vocal and very physically uh physically present for a lot of the protests
Yeah, yeah,
for the removal of the statue. So I had a lot of feelings around it, and I didn't know if I'd be able to articulate them in a way that made sense. So I almost didn't write the poem. I want to say I the statue actually, or we recorded the poem around like 4 a.m. Like they were taking forever to move that statue down. So we were
yeah. They
outside
were.
super
Yeah,
late. And I might have finished it around like 2. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go say what I have to say and get this poem off my chest. Um, I also say that I was I dressed in all black, and they were like, "Oh, you have all black?" And I'm like, "Yeah, because I'm at a funeral."
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like I was very dramatic about it because I was really trying to like control my emotions. It was just like, I'm angry right now, and y'all want me to do a poem like for
Yeah.
this historic moment that honestly shouldn't have took this much.
Yeah, that's true.
Like it shouldn't have took all that. You know, we were in the midst of a pandemic, and to have to worry about this statue being removed because people were just in their heads and, for lack of better words, up their own butts about
Yeah.
something that did not matter that much anymore. Like, this man's been dead for God knows how long. And we know the horrible things that he did. We know what era we're in. We know we need change. Like, why are y'all fighting it so hard? So
Yeah.
I felt like I put all of that in that poem. Um, and when I recited it, I felt like not relief, but like, oh, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing with these words.
Yeah.
Like, I'm supposed to make people think and feel. Word to Octavia Butler.
Yeah. Speaking of the pandemic,
Hmm.
being a poet, because I've had this conversation with other poets, do you find like during that time, do you feel like you had more to write about then, or was it difficult for you to write and tap into your creativity, or even did you even feel like writing during that time?
So I'm always very careful when I talk about the pandemic because it was like a tumultuous time. And I know that a lot of people had a lot of grievances during that
Yeah.
era. But the pandemic for me was probably the first time that I've ever had like a vacation. Like, I'd been working since I was 14. Like, I think the
Yeah.
closest thing I ever had to a real vacation was like student leadership camp or like going to a concert with a friend or something. Like, I'd never had time to just sit. So
Yeah.
I needed that lockdown. My words, I wrote so much during the pandemic. I created so much during the pandemic because I actually had time. I actually had time to sit and think, and I was getting them stimulus checks. So I actually had finances for once to be able to like do things. Like, I've never had my own personal computer before the pandemic. And I bought one for the first time because I was like, oh, okay, like I want to take myself
Yeah.
seriously. I hadn't had a smartphone in about 5 years before the pandemic. I was like literally moving off of a trap phone.
Hey.
And I was like, okay, like I'm gonna get a phone so that I can communicate with people, mainly,
Yeah.
to be able to FaceTime my family because they live away from me. But I was like, now I can do things. Now I can be a part of the internet and like putting myself out there. So it was, I don't know, it was a very pivotal time for me, and I needed that, and I was really grateful for it. Uh, yeah,
It, it's, I mean, that's some people's story.
yeah,
Everybody didn't have the same experience. A lot of people I've talked to even said like you, it's like during that time they were able to actually rest or actually
yeah,
slow down. And I think, of course it was a horrible time and, lost people were sick and things like that. People
oh
lost
yeah,
jobs. But there are a few people that moment actually was something that they needed at that time in their life, the slowing down, because we get so caught up in, like you said, working.
hmm,
And some people, when they didn't have a job anymore, things worked out to where they were able to still survive without having a job, but they were able to sit still. And
yeah,
it just opened up a lot of things, good things for some people. Bad, facing fears and thoughts and different things like that was kind of troubling for some people. But there are just few people who this was a moment where they actually, like you said, computer, smartphone, writing, and being able to tap into creativity.
yeah. I think for again, it was like all of this stuff was going on the outside, but I was basically in a room in an apartment. Like, my partner was an essential worker, so I was by myself so much. And I'm a person, I require a lot of alone time that I don't usually get because I'm, a caretaker
Right.
and very community oriented. So I don't get to spend a lot of time by myself. But the pandemic gave me that. And I think like the 2 years before that, I had kind of stopped considering myself a writer or a poet. And I found that again during the pandemic. I wouldn't have even applied to be poet laureate had I not had that time to sit with myself and really figure out like what my path was.
Wow. It's interesting. Yeah, that's why I asked that question, because it's interesting. I get different answers from different people.
I
Um,
appreciate that question too. Like it's something
yeah,
that I've thought about for a long time.
yeah, because I even had a talk to another poet, and he said during that time, that's when he was really at it, like with slam poetry and stuff, and getting on lives. And after that, it just kind of died down. Like he still loves the art, but as far as performing and stuff, he just kind of lost it. So did you participate in any virtual lives or any virtual events during that
Yeah,
time?
actually. I hosted a I want to say like one or two open mics with the Avery Research Center. I also participated in a couple others for like the Moja Arts Festival, for the Free Verse Festival and whatnot.
Ah,
And
yeah, I remember
those
that.
were
Yeah.
fun. Like I love virtual things, and that's one thing that the pandemic gave me. Again, I like being around people, but I really need a lot of time to recharge. But being able to do stuff from my home was like I don't need as much bounce back.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
able
true.
to go out and do other things, which is why I always tell people now, if you want to book me for something virtual where I can be in my house and we can fellowship, but like people's energies are just a lot for me. And I also understand that I
Yeah.
am a person who like people enjoy being around my energy a lot. And so that requires me to be in a good space to give the kind of energy that they need. And that requires a lot of solitude.
I
So
understand. Yeah, yeah, I understand.
it's a balance. It's a
it,
balance
it
game.
very much so. It is a balance. So now that things are not so much virtual,
Mhm.
I can't remember what the event was, but I wanted to come out to it. I wasn't able to make it. You hosted it. I know you had on black. That might not help you remember
I say
to.
I wear black so
Yeah,
much.
I know. That's why I was like, it's.
Let me think. Was
I
it
cannot.
last year?
It was last year.
Was
It's at
it
the tip of.
Poetry and Focus? Which is like an event that it was almost a play, but it was like an ekphrastic response to the movie Losing Ground.
I think that was it.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
sounds familiar. Yeah, what was that experience like? How? Because I
That was
wasn't
really
able to
fun.
attend. Yeah.
Uh I mean, so I'm a big like advocate for community work and collaboration. That's how most of my art comes across, or like comes to fruition. Is definitely never a singular journey. And Poetry and Focus was really just a chance for me to collaborate with poets that I admired and musicians that I admired and talk about something that I love, which is film. Um, and so I had two other poets, Alex Peters, who goes by Queen Guillotine, and then
Hmm.
Brittany Porche, who goes by Truth Seeker the Poet. And then I also collaborated with my partner and my best friend, who have a duo, electronic music duo called Geechee Technologies.
Ah,
Um,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so she recorded a piece, and my partner did a live scoring during our poems. And so it was, I don't know, it was a very organic experience.
yeah,
Like we had talked about it previously, like for about 3-4 months, but we hadn't heard each other's work or anything until like 2 days before the show. And the way that we were just all in sync, and like the poems moved and the sound helped with the poem, and there were certain parts that like we just came up with together in that rehearsal, like, oh, this would make sense, or, oh, that would make sense. It was just, yeah, it was probably one of my favorite experiences of last year.
yeah. Something else was going on that night, and I was like, man. And then I saw the pictures, and I was like, man.
We all be so busy.
Yeah. So, you've talked about filmmaking a couple of times.
Mhm.
What are you currently working on? Anything?
So I feel like I'm always working on a script. I'm always writing something. The most recent thing that I worked on, again, one of my best friends, their name is Nisi Blues, and they are an electronic musician.
Yeah, yeah.
And we shot their music video, I want to say last October. It hasn't come out yet, But I'm super excited about that because we just had so much fun. It was such a beautiful, organic, like it was just me and her shooting and like creating together, and it was just it was, I don't know, like an inflaming event. Like it really
Yeah.
lit something inside of me because I don't think I had been behind a camera in a while. At least not in that capacity. But yeah.
So, have you turned any of your poems into film or vice versa?
So I definitely have poems that are a part of a film, a part of a script that I'm working on, which it kind of falls in the lineage of Intozaki Sanji's For Colored Girls, how that she considers that a choreo
Okay.
poem. I definitely feel like I tend to write like cinematic poems, and I really want to find a way to marry those a little bit better. I've thought about like doing poems into short films or whatnot, but I always say that the things will happen in divine timing. It just hasn't happened yet.
That's something I want to do myself. I need to just quit talking about it and doing it.
I
Uh,
mean, it's honestly, it's just writing the thing down and doing the thing.
yeah, yeah, you're right. It's something so simple. And I
But yeah,
actually know this because anytime somebody asks me about, like, when it comes to writing, I just tell them just do it. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect. The hardest part is starting.
and I think that's the thing. We get in our heads so much about like perfecting that craft, and it's like you'll never know what perfect is if you don't mess up first.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's true.
You know, it's like a first draft. Like it's not gonna be perfect, but you did the thing. You can always go back and fix it. Like I'm of the belief I can put out a film tomorrow, and then 10 years down the line decide I don't really like that. I want to change the ending, and I can do that because it's mine.
That's a very good point.
You know.
We talked about that a little bit in the pre-show, and I'm just
Mhm.
like, yeah, sometimes we get into our own heads and want everything to be perfect and afraid to share those first drafts. And I has this ever happened to you? It's been times that I've written a poem and I messed with it a couple of times and then ended up not liking it, but thankfully I had the first draft still available, so I stuck with
All the
that.
time, all the time. Like it is. I feel like I will change a poem based off of like what somebody else thinks or what I think somebody else will think, and then I'll be like, I actually don't like that. Like, who is this poem for? And I have to remind myself like this poem is for me. Like,
Yeah.
even if it's for somebody else, I'm writing it because I need to. So I want it to sound how I want it to sound. I want it to look how I want it to look. And it's okay if I have to change that a couple times.
Somebody asked me this before. When it comes to posting your poems online, is there ever like a thought of, I'm trying to think how they asked me, when you're sharing something online, as
Mhm.
far as like on Instagram or something, are you still always writing it for you, or are you trying to make sure it has certain things in there for other people?
Um, no, I think I'm always writing it for and from me, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah.
Like I even when I put stuff out online, like, I take feedback and I actually let me I'm bad about putting stuff online. I'm horrible about that. One of my best friends, Willie, his thing is always like publish the poem. Put the poem out there. Like he knows I have drafts and drafts and drafts that just haven't seen the light of day. Um so I'm working on that. But when I actually do release stuff online, it's like this is what it is. Like it's for me, and it's from me to you. So it's like giving somebody a gift. Like you're not, yeah, like you think a little bit like, oh, what would this person like if this, person liked this thing, but you're also like, I like this thing for you.
Got it. That's what I've asked a couple other poets that too, and we all so far pretty much said the same thing. It's just like you can't get into that thought process of, if I put it out there, how's everybody going to receive it? Because if it wasn't for social media, we wouldn't care about that anyway. So it's
Yeah.
just like all it is an extension of a way to share our work. So I just attack it with, I hope people resonate with it. At least one person will. I know I did. So
Exactly. Like, I don't know. We've got to get out this mindset that we can make something for everybody. Like, that's just not realistic.
no, yeah.
People like different things, they experience different things, they connect to different things. Like, I'm writing for the people who get me. And whether that's 2 people or 2 million people, I'm writing the things for them. And well, for me, to them.
And that's very important because you lose yourself if you're trying to please everybody. And I mean, it sounds so simple when we think about we don't like everything. So of course
Exactly.
everybody's not gonna like anything, but sometimes we put that little bit of pressure on us. It's just like, and it's like, no, no. I mean, hey, if one, like
Yeah,
you said, 2 people love it, cool. 2 million people love it, cool.
exactly.
Do you have any hobbies outside of filmmaking and poetry?
Mm. I probably have way too many hobbies.
Way
That's
too many? That's okay.
a lot of my problem. um, I like, let's see, I make paper, like recycled paper. Um,
Oh,
because during the pandemic, I really wanted a tangible talent.
yeah,
Like, I wanted something to do with my hands, and I had like a ton of paper bills, whatever left over, and I think I saw a video on somebody making like seed bombs, which is like recycled paper with seeds, like in a little ball, and you just plant it in the ground and they grow. So I
really?
would make little seed papers for my friends, or like to send in a book. I had a pen pal at that time or whatnot, and I just got really into like the idea of making something from something else. Like, upcycling is my thing. I also run a vintage market, so that happens quarterly. Sustainability is really my
Yeah.
jam. So I try to figure out ways in which I can incorporate sustainability in my life, and
Yeah.
vintage markets have been a part of that for at least like the greater part of the last 10, 15 years. Um, so I consider that a hobby. We do it once a quarter, so it's not like a continuous thing. But that's super fun. I don't know. I'm like, what else is considered a hobby? I like walking, and I like herbalism. I'm really into like making tinctures and studying how herbs affect our bodies. I would say I used to be into gardening, but I moved, so I no longer have like a ground garden
Yeah.
to garden. But I am working on like a little container garden so that I can at least grow like the basics, my onions, my garlic, stuff that I regularly use.
That's what we want to try to get into, at least like a little pot, maybe
You know,
some tomatoes or like you said, onions, garlic, stuff like that. We
simple
did
stuff.
like
Tomatoes are hard though. I will
they
tell you
are.
that. Tomatoes are hard. And it's mainly just because of the spiders. Like, spiders love tomatoes, and like
Yeah.
squirrels, animals love tomatoes. So like it is stressful. I let my mom handle those.
That's what I was thinking about because we have a bunch of birds in our backyard and squirrels,
Mm,
and it's like, okay, if we do that, we're gonna have to put in some type of enclosure. But those
yeah.
animals
Oh,
are
gators.
smart. They know how to open that stuff up.
They really do. Oh my god.
So it's just like
But like it's gardening is one of those things. I always say I have a yellow thumb. Like, my mom and my grandma have very green thumbs. They can grow anything. For me, it's like I grow herbs. I can grow things that kind of grow on their own, that don't require too much attention.
yeah,
But
we
I do
have
my
plants. Yeah, we do plants.
you know,
A couple of them didn't make it, but you learn.
mm, yeah.
Um, probably should have took them to my parents' house. Because my father is really good with plants, like bringing them back. I
I
mean, ever
love
since
that.
I was little,
That's how
that's
my mom
just
is.
yeah. It's just like wow. Like, how do you like? It's been plants that we've had. I know since I was like little, and he's planting them outside, and it's just of course they moved since then, but I'm
Yeah.
just like, this is a plant that was here when I was little. He took that much care of it. And then here it is. I get a plant from something and then it's gone. But I'm working on that though. I'm working on it.
Look, we are here. We are same boat.
Yeah, my wife does better with that. She knows all the names of plants and stuff. Like we have plants in the house. She knows what kind they are and stuff. And I'm just like, oh, okay, all right, well,
Trying to get better. I
try,
get you.
try to learn, try to learn.
Hmm.
What's the one thing about you that most people probably don't know that you wish more people knew?
Oh, I'm funny. I'm
Doesn't everybody
I'm
know that?
I don't, the thing is, people think because I'm again the poet laureate, they expect me to be so serious and like
Yeah.
soft and and dramatically poetic. And I'm like, I'm so jokey. Like I want to be laughing most of the time, but like I again, most people they are thrown off by
Yeah.
me being like, "Oh my god, you're so normal." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm normal. I'm very again funny. I'm goofy. I'm very country." And I think sometimes people don't expect that from me either. I'm like, "No, I grew up on dirt roads." I my grandparents are from Jacksonville, North Carolina, and we were basically raised by them. Like we are very country people, and I'm proud of that.
Hey. Wow. Why do people do that when it comes to titles? Just assume that,
I don't know. It's been the
wow.
weirdest. That's probably been the weirdest part of this whole thing is like the expectations that people have of me. And I'm like, who are y'all meeting in these? Do y'all not meet regular people?
Right.
Like, is everybody like, do we go through some type of metamorphosis when you get a title that makes you this like stick of a person? Because I don't know how to be that. Like, I don't know how to be fake. I don't know how to, you know, the only time that I know how to put on is when I'm on stage. Like I put on that character, but other than
Yeah.
that, like I'm me.
And that's what we need more of, people just being themselves. I mean, it's
Honestly,
I think I think that especially with people in positions, it's probably what they're used to. They're probably used to people getting titles and being different and
like people
being,
always said, these things change you, and I'm like, yeah, it made me have to adult a little bit more. I got to pay attention on my taxes, but other than that, I'm still pretty much me.
yeah.
We, writing better poems though.
Yeah, that was gonna be my next question. Like, what has your writing experience been like as of late? Do you
Mm.
find yourself sticking with different topics, or do you find yourself more wide open when it comes to writing things? Like, what's your writing process like now?
So I feel like previously, like I wrote whatever I wanted, however I felt. I always call myself like a love poet. Because that's usually the space that I'm writing from. Like whether it's good or bad, it's still love at the center.
Yeah,
Whereas now, like I'm having to maneuver that into topics that people specifically ask for, which is weird for me. And especially like when people are like, "Oh, we want poems about the city," and I'm like, "Y'all sure y'all want that for me?" Because I got a
right.
lot of love for this city, but not the same city that y'all are looking at.
Yeah.
So it's been different, but not. I'm taking the pressure off of myself. People tend to put that pressure on you, and I realized that like, oh, this was pressure given to me by other people that I don't necessarily need to carry. And so that's made the writing process a lot smoother these days.
Okay. So, are you getting other requests now that you are the poet laureate? Like people just randomly, like, hey.
Yeah. Uh I mean, I feel like I feel like honestly, anytime you open your mouth and you say you're a poet, somebody's like, "Oh, give me a poem right now."
That's true. Yeah.
And I'm like, "Give me some money right now." Like this, this is not like no. If you want a song to play from a jukebox, you're gonna put a quarter in it. Like you're gonna
That's a
have to
good
come up
point.
off something. I'm not I'm not doing that for free. So that's been a very interesting experience in a lot of these spaces too. Just like I feel like I've always shut that down, but now I'm having to be even more assertive about it.
Right.
With them just being like, "Oh, you're a poet laureate. You should give us something." And I'm like, I I have a website where you can go look at my poems. I got videos up on YouTube if you need something right now. you know,
Right.
but we're not shucking and jiving on
Yeah. Yeah.
the drop
Yeah.
of a hat for folks.
This is a question that I've been asked lately,
Mm.
and It's interesting because nobody's ever asked this before, but who are your favorite poets?
That is hard. That is such a hard question. Uh, hmm. Okay, so Intozaki Sanji is my grail. Like, she is my North Star. That's mother. I'm always gonna come back there. Um, I've always been a big fan of Lucille Clifton and Gwendolyn Brooks,
Yeah.
for the way that they communicate and they make poetry so accessible to people.
Yeah.
They are weaving words in ways that I feel like I'll be trying my whole life to aspire to, and I'm grateful for that. Like, I'm grateful for that kind of lineage to aspire to. Um, but honestly, Willie Kennard is my best friend and my favorite poet that I know.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, it is I every time Willie opens his mouth, every time his pen touch a page, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm here for it. I'm here for whatever journey he's taking me on, and it's really an honor to exist in the same timeline as him
Yeah.
and like get to work so closely with his mind. I wouldn't be half the poet that I even think I am had he not met me when he did. My literary friendships are everything for me. Yeah, and I'm always any opportunity to up Willie, I'm going to do it.
Community is very important. Is I don't know why some people don't want to have communities or connect themselves with people who are like-minded or people who are in their field or especially like I don't think it's like that so much with us as like writers and poets, but like other people they see other people in the same space as like competition. But like with
Yeah.
us, we're just like we're always trying to big up each other and trying to help each other and push each other to do better. And we're learning from each other, I think, like whenever we can.
And again, I think that does have a lot to do with the idea of competition, and I'm very grateful to have grown up with the mother that I had, who was always like, "You ain't better than nobody, but ain't nobody better than you."
Right.
And that sits with me constantly. Like, I am my competition. If I'm in a room with you, I'm not trying to compete. I'm trying to, like, what you got going on? How can I help you? Like, how can we make this thing better? How can we both be better? Like, that's always at the forefront of my heart. Uh, and when I encounter people who may view me as competition, it kind of makes me sad. 'Cause I'm like, dang, like, you're so focused on what it is that you're doing to your own detriment,
Yeah.
to the point where you're missing out on great connections and great opportunities and real love. Like, the love that I have gotten from other writers and poets is unmatched in this lifetime. Like, it is ridiculous. I've gone places and fellowship with poets for like a week, and I'm like, you are in my life forever. I love you. Like,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we really sat in that moment and wanted to bond. We wanted community, and I'm just so sad for people who don't want that and don't realize that they need that.
Me too. Yeah. Because that's a whole nother show by itself.
Hmm.
It's- before I let you get out of here, is there anything you want to share? How people can connect with you, any projects you have coming up, anything?
Mm. Well, I am on the social medias at iahMae, and that is ASIAHMAE. I do have the $ in my name, but not on my social media apps. But when addressing me, that would be fun. I like my $ is an homage to the Deep South and Cash Money Records that raised me.
Ah,
So, I
yes.
always want to give that respect there. As far as things that I have coming up, I have an open mic with the John L. Dart Library on October 24th. On the 25th, I have a performance at Charleston Music Hall for this traveling storytelling event called The Moth that I'm really excited for.
Okay.
And I'll be looking to do some anthology work, some archival work with some poets towards the end of the year. So I'd say keep a lookout on socials. Stay connected with me. Tap into my daily poems so that you can hear me stumble
Yes.
through some really great works. Yeah, and don't hesitate to reach out. Like I said, like If you ever have any questions, and I say you as in viewers, you ever have any questions, you just want to kiki, like, I'm a normal person. So yeah, tap in with me.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for
And
having me.
yeah, to my listeners, remember, keep pushing forward. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Brown Sugar Cafe podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Terrence P. Elmore, and this is the place where poetry meets conversation. Hit that follow button and turn on your notifications so you won't miss an episode. Check out my blog, thebrownsugarcafe.blog. Also connect with me on Instagram at thebrownsugarcafe. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and as always, remember, keep pushing forward.